I came to Clear Creek Metro Park today, which is a very large metro park that's actually managed by the Franklin County Park System, Park District. Because it's a gray day, I'm here on New Year's Eve, late December, obviously, and I thought, what could we do? What could we look at to brighten up the habitat around me? And that's to look at Ohio's native evergreens. If you want to pick one spot to see the majority of Ohio's native evergreen species, this park is a great place to do that, because many of them exist here, either as native plants or escapes from cultivation. And in either way, this park probably has the greatest abundance of Ohio's native evergreens than any other park, I'd guess, in Ohio. That's because it's where it's situated. It's situated in south central Ohio, and it catches the northern limits of more southern, southeastern species, some of our pines, and as well as the western limits of some of our eastern, northeastern species. So it's kind of the best of both worlds sort of park. There are a few species that exist here that I believe are escapes from planting as well. So, but we'll take a look at them anyhow. All right, so let's see what we can see. I've been walking along the Hemlock Trail, and I have been paralleling a small creek down here in this gorge, and which is basically lined by hemlocks, eastern hemlocks, Tsuga canadensis. I just tried to pick a spot that gives you a feeling for what a hemlock dominated forest looks like. Okay, so these trees are lining this cool gorge, which kind of indicates the habitats that they prefer. And when you get out farther away from this gorge, they become fewer and farther between. There are quite a few larger trees here, as well as smaller trees. And I do see that some of the larger trees are dying and falling. I'll try to find our largest hemlock today. But this is a little bit of an indicator of what a hemlock habitat looks like. Often bordering small, cool gorges. In some cases, they can dominate an area. They're heavily shading, and they can really change the nature of an area. And in reverse, when they go away, the area changes quite a bit too. It becomes much brighter, warmer, and drier. And that can happen, for example, when insects like hemlock woolly adelgid attack the trees, which can kill the trees, along with some other attackers. So unfortunately, this beautiful tree, which is a hallmark of eastern U.S. cool mountain forests, is under threat from a couple of insects, that one and hemlock scales. So it's unfortunately losing some of its prominence throughout the Appalachians, where it used to be quite abundant. All right, so let's look up close and personal with a hemlock then. So here's what hemlock looks like. The leaves, the needles. Okay, they're flat, soft, blue-green, and they have little white stripes on the undersides. Okay, they're very soft, thin twigs. They make very small cones. It's incredible the size of the seeds. The size of the seeds are the size of like a lettuce seed, and they grow into these huge trees. All right, so this is eastern hemlock. This is one of my favorite trees, partly because of the tree itself, but also the kind of habitat, the wild habitats that it represents. All right, so let's move on to our next evergreen at Clear Creek Metro Park. Here's a hemlock growing in a little bit more of an open area. We're outside a little gorge now, more on an upland, but this is a nice upright hemlock showing its growth form when it has a little bit of room to move, has enough light, has a very nice form. This tree is probably, based on its diameter, it's probably about 40 or 50 years old, I would guess. And it's a really beautifully formed tree. I've seen this tree before. I know I've taken pictures of it. I just thought we'd get up close to this one. Take a look up at the canopy. Give you a feel for that. and take a look at the light brown, kind of scaly, little bit furrowed bark of eastern hemlock. And that bark, by the way, was one of the uses of hemlocks historically. It contains a lot of tannins. So hemlock bark was harvested heavily to use in tanneries in the 1800s. And so that impacted a lot of hemlock where it was grown. You could also make hemlock lumber as well, but the tanning industry made heavy use of hemlocks. Next stop on our tour of Ohio's evergreens is this species. This is commonly called mountain laurel, Kalmia latifolia. This is an evergreen broadleaved shrub. You can almost call it a small tree, I suppose. This one's fairly tall for a mountain laurel. It's about 10 feet tall. But these are mostly smallish shrubs, and they grow in fairly drier hillsides and so forth in the northeastern US in the Appalachian Mountains. So we have this throughout southeastern Ohio, and deer love these things. All right, so when you see a mountain laurel out in the wild, it looks like this one, where the lower branches, the lower stem, is basically devoid of branches with leaves, because deer love to eat mountain laurel. All right, so as I look around, there's another one behind here, exhibits that same kind of morphology, and that's almost entirely due to deer. All right, so mountain laurel makes a beautiful flower in fairly early, say in June. Similar to mountain laurel, an evergreen broadleaf species, you can find populations of rhododendron maximum, here in Clear Creek Metro Park. This is a pretty rare tree or shrub for Ohio. It's only known from a few counties, and it can be found scattered throughout Clear Creek Metro Park, lining these cliff faces, growing streamside, very much like mountain laurel, but bigger. It has much larger leaves. It flowers a little later in the season, can produce a beautiful floral display. And so that's one of our broadleaf evergreens in Clear Creek Metro Park, rhododendron. Ahead of me now is one of my favorite sort of broadleaved evergreen trees. This tree is native to Ohio in far southern counties like Scioto and Lawrence and maybe Adams. So it's probably outside of its normal native range here in Clear Creek, but you can find it scattered around here. And that could be because it was planted somewhere in a homestead and spread by birds because of the fruits it produces. And this tree is American holly, Ilex opaca. All right, it's very distinctive. These sharp spines on the leaves, the glossy leaves, kind of dull green, lighter on the underside there. I just got stabbed by one. And the females of this species make bright red fruits. From the use of holly as a decoration. And this one has no fruits, so it's probably a male. They have male and female. They're dioecious. That means they have separate male and female plants. So this must be a male, or else it's a female that did not flower this year. But I've seen this tree also for a long time. So American holly is really interesting and unique evergreen that is native to Ohio that people kind of forget about. I really like, though. Well, I found a holly in its full holiday ornamentation. Okay, so here's a holly with its holly berries, holly fruits, bright red against that brilliant glossy green backdrop. You can see why it's people consider that to be festive, especially around the holidays. So this is obviously a female holly. This is truly a holly. And it's just loaded with these fruits that will be slowly taken by birds and dispersed. That's probably why a lot of the hollies we're seeing scattered throughout the woods are there. Okay, whether these trees were initially planted here ornamentally or not. So that's holly. Next on our agenda of Ohio's native evergreens is pitch pine. Pitch pine is native to far southeastern Ohio. And again, this is a spot where it's quite abundant. Okay, a lot of these trees, these evergreen top trees you see around me in this particular location are pitch pines. This is a little bit outside of what I think would be their native range in Ohio. They're more of a far southeastern species, but they are abundant here. They could have been planted and spread. It's hard to tell, but in any case, they're quite abundant here. So this is the characteristic bark of pitch pine, kind of reddish brown and kind of forms these plate-like attachments, okay, in the outer bark. All right, so kind of a plated appearance. And then the needles come in bunches of 3, okay? And they have a slight twist to them. They can be 4 or 5 inches long. So we're far distant from the green needles, which are way up there. Okay, this is characteristic of what trees do when their lower branches die back because it's too shady, and the only remaining foliage is at the top of the tree, okay, like that. But we have the dead needles, okay, that drop to the ground. And so there's your characteristic pitch pine needle, 4 to 5 inches long in a bundle of 3. You know, pine needles come in bundles, and they have a little slight curve to them, okay? And pitch pine is called that because they form a lot of pitch. They have a lot of resin in their bark. And pitch pine is one of these pines that in habitats where it's common and dominates in the East Coast and Northeast, it can survive fire and resprout and regrow after fire. So you can have large pitch pine dominated areas where fire is a common occurrence. Okay, so that's pitch pine. Well, I stopped here to take a look at this little interesting reaction that trees can have to being bound by a vine, or a wire, or a rope for that matter, where the tree continues to grow as a vine climbs the trunk. There you can see the inserted vine in this tree, and it grows in a way is partially girdled by that vine. And it's, you know, the parts that are swollen there are where the live vascular tissue has remained, the live vein, you could call it, while parts of the trunk are being girdled by the vine. Okay, so you end up with these, what you could call corkscrew trees. A lot of species react pretty strongly to this. This happens to be a sassafras tree, but they're really interesting to see. They're not good for the tree necessarily, but it does indicate what the tree will do, how it will grow to compensate for being bound by a vine. Okay, now this vine that's doing this is Japanese honeysuckle. Here it is in green leaf still in late December. This is a non-native invasive vine, and this just illustrates one of the kinds of problems it can cause, all right, as a non-native invasive species. Here we have a small version of what can be a giant of the northeastern forest, and that's white pine. And white pine is distinguished by long, soft needles that come in bundles of 5. These are pretty small needles, but if you're able to look up close and personal at them, they come in bundles of 5. They're very soft. They have a bluish green kind of haze to them, waxy-like appearance. And this tree is one of the giants of the North Woods. This tree can grow to be 140, 150 feet tall. I've seen giant white pines in Pennsylvania, which I hope to visit in this series, in that area, you know, in that realm, okay, 3-4 feet in diameter. I don't know that there are many large white pines in Clear Creek, but there are white pines. This is a native Ohio pine, mostly native to northeastern Ohio, but it's planted throughout the whole state as an ornamental. It was planted in a lot of restoration projects. There are large stands of large trees in places like Shawnee State Forest in southern Ohio. So white pine is another beautiful native pine, and you can find that at Clear Creek Metro Park. After you emerge out of the gorges in Clear Creek Metro Park, you do get to some drier ridgetops. Some of these actually have some little prairie restorations planted on them, like which is in a little distant in front of me there. But what you see on these drier ridgetops are things I have pointed out in the past to you, including lots of chestnut oaks. So here's a chestnut oak with its very characteristic blocky bark, gnarly appearance, and they dominate these dry ridgetops in the foothills of the Appalachians, all throughout Ohio and also into Pennsylvania and so on. So as I look down into the gorges, I see the hemlocks peeking out, but most of them are not up here on top of the ridge, save for a couple rare specimens. While on the subject of evergreens, let's talk about moss for a minute. Moss is a plant. Okay, it's what we would call a lower plant. It doesn't make flowers. It doesn't make fruit with seeds. They have no roots. They have no vascular system. They're small, low-growing plants. They do photosynthesize, and they reproduce via spores. All right, so they blend traits of their ancestors, algae, with those of higher plants. All right, and mosses are evergreen. You know, they're green pretty much all year. They do kind of flourish at different times of the season, but they're out here in full force, nice and bright, even on this gray winter day. Well, since we're on the fern trail, I thought we'd talk about ferns. So I'd say the majority of ferns are not evergreen. They don't stay green throughout the winter. They die back and then they regrow in the spring. But there are several species that are evergreen, okay? They're green all year long. And this is one of them, one of the most prominent ones. Really beautiful fern. It's called Christmas fern. Okay, these species get these kinds of names, you know, because this thing is still nice and bright green around Christmas time. Of course, it'll grow new fronds. This is what you would call a frond. It will grow new fronds again in the spring, but it keeps its old ones throughout the year that stay green. All throughout the stream bottom here at Clear Creek, you can find this interesting and ancient plant. It's called horsetail. And it has these thin cylindrical stems. They have this jointed appearance to them. Very prehistoric looking. Okay, they like moist soils. All right, again, this is a lower plant. It does not make flowers. It does not make fruits with seeds. It reproduces via spores. And it is really occupying the riparian area here, the streamside area of Clear Creek Metro Park. Horsetail is known for a couple of features, including the fact that I had the park ranger slow to see what I was doing over here, I guess. Horsetail is known for accumulating silica in its cell walls, in its cells. Okay, and so people would take these bunches of these stems, sort of bunch them up. I can feel the gritty nature of them right now, and you could clean out pots and pans with them. You know, when you're out there in the, you know, the open range, crossing into these areas without modern conveniences, you could clean your pots with this horsetail, which has also been known as scouring rush because of that feature. Okay, so it's very dense, very interesting, very ancient looking plant that is now planted ornamentally sometimes because of that. So this is Clear Creek itself. This is a high quality stream, one of only 3 that they stock with trout in the state of Ohio. And it flows, upper reaches flow through agricultural areas, but it flows here through several miles of a wooded gorge. So it's pretty clean, has a sandy bottom, and they do stock trout mostly through the colder months. It does get a little bit too warm to keep trout year round, but I see a lot of fishermen today, and I think they stocked relatively recently. So, and there could be some holdover trout that do make it all year. So that's actually Clear Creek itself. I'm on a little bridge, obviously, across it. All right, I'm here with Patrick. He's been doing a little fishing on Clear Creek. And so I just happened to come across him as I was getting out of the car. Thought I'd ask him how things went. So what do you have there, Patrick?
Nope, just pair rainbow trout we caught today, doing a little winter fly fishing.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about this stream and the trout stocking program and so forth.
Well, it's through the ODNR, and they stock it. I say it's a handful of times starting, mid-November and close to Thanksgiving once the water gets cold enough. So it normally holds fish from then to about mid-May.
Okay, as I understand it, this is one of the only couple of stock streams in Ohio. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you have Clear Creek here in the southeast, and then Clear Fork a little more north, and then Mad River in the west.
Okay. So what were you using today? How were you going after these things?
Going just with some fly gear, kind of mix up the fly, and I'm catching off some small midges.
All right. So what strategies do you need to use this time of year to get these things?
Deeper and slow normally.
Okay.
So they're stock trout, so they aren't quite as picky on some days. Today they were pretty picky, so it just kind of depends. Yeah, normally when it's cold like this, they aren't going to be in anything fast.
Are these the only two you got, or do you have others? That,
no, I probably caught, I don't know, like 5 or 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
nice.
It's a 2-fish limit.
All right.
If you are going to be keeping them on Clear Creek.
Right. And I guess I should point out we're here on New Year's Eve. So how long ago do you think these trout were stocked? How long have they been in the stream?
Depends. The way they were acting, I think they've probably at least been in here a month or so. But like I said, they're a little sporadic, and they tend to not publicize at all when they're going to stock, so it gives the fish a chance to disperse throughout the creek.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, what were your impressions of the day overall?
It wasn't too cold. It was above freezing, so my reel didn't freeze up, so pretty good day.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So you'll come out here when it's much colder, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
On time.
Yeah. Because I tend to do more this time of year.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks a lot, Patrick, and nice job.
Yeah, thank you.
Prominent throughout this part of Ohio, in southeastern and eastern Ohio, is the sandstone bedrock that underlies this area. We're in the foothills of the Appalachians, and this whole area, including Clear Creek Metro Park, the Hocking Hills, and many other places that people like to visit, are known for their impressive, striking sandstones, some of which have eroded and formed caves and rock shelters and those sorts of things. This sandstone is about 355 million years old, probably the result of ancient seabeds that have been uplifted, and they form a lot of striking formations you can see throughout this gorge and elsewhere. Let's take a look at a couple of features of it. One is the color. It can be very brilliant orange, yellow, brown, purple. And it's, it erodes, its lower layers often erode into rock shelters that people find interesting, and some are deeper than others. We're obviously just along a road side here in Clear Creek Metro Park. But there's lots of interesting features you can see in this sandstone. I just learned recently about these that form these striations. These are called Lisa Gang formations, and they're mineral-rich, iron-rich deposits that were formed by solution basically percolating through the sandstones. And where you find those striations with this mineral-rich deposit, it's more resistant to erosion. So they form these projections that stick out from the face of the rock and form very interesting formations. A little bit of this is paint from vandals, okay, but there are all kinds of interesting colors and natural features here that you can see in Clear Creek Metro Park and throughout this whole area. These are called Black Hand sandstones, by the way, named after Black Hand Gorge, where a Native American piece of artwork, a black hand imprinted on the sandstone, was discovered at one point, but apparently subsequently destroyed in excavations or what have you. But these sandstones are now called Black Hand sandstones. Regarding that Black Hand sandstone, one thing you see scattered all throughout southeastern Ohio are these old hand-hewn sandstone blocks that were used in construction of foundations for barns and houses and cabins. You can still see on some of them the chisel marks from the stone chisels that were used, okay, to carve these things out of these cliffs in many cases. Okay, here's one you can see where it was chiseled all along the edges to shape it. All right, now this is a little wall that's been rebuilt using these stones, but you do see these in old cabins and, you know, old barn foundations and things all throughout this part of Ohio. So that's a little bit about the use of blackhand sandstones in construction. Toward the east end of Clear Creek Metro Park, there's the famous Leaning Lena, a big chunk of sandstone slumped off the cliff up above, rests right next to Clear Creek Road, and basically looks like a trap from Wile E. Coyote set for the Roadrunner, basically. And there's no good spot to park right here, so I'm filming this in my car as we travel under Leaning Lena and hope for the best. Here we go. All right, we made it. Wile E. Coyote will have to wait till next time. A highlight you can see at the far eastern edge of the park is this fairly newly restored but historic cabin called the Matthias Cabin. And it's in really nice shape. You can see it's been repointed. There's been new masonry. This cabin has beams. I'm not sure what it's constructed of, but they're very wormy. Okay, they're full of wormholes. That suggests that this could be chestnut. It could be pine. I'm not entirely sure what this cabin was constructed from. That looks like all the original timber that's just been put back together. And so I believe this cabin is used for special events and things like that. It's a really, really beautiful little spot. Again, here's more of that blackhand sandstone, showing you the hand workings, you know, with the stone tools to square off these big chunks of sandstone. Okay, so those have all been used, and I suppose they used a little bit of new lumber when they rebuilt this cabin, but it's really interesting. These main beams definitely look to be pretty original, if you ask me. So all hand worked with adzes, things to square off the round lumber and fit together. It's very possible this was fit together using no nails. I'm not sure about that. Okay, but notched end pieces. It's a pretty large cabin as well, as far as cabins go. It wasn't just a little tiny cabin that you see scattered throughout this part of Ohio. For one small family, it's a pretty big one. So it could have been used for gatherings or what have you. So, but this is Matthias Cabin, found at the east end of Clear Creek Metro Park. Okay, nice little spot. Thanks for joining me on this botanical and geological tour of Clear Creek Metro Park on the border of Hocking and Fairfield counties in south central Ohio. I hope you enjoyed it and see you next time. Take care.